Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go with another one of these interviews about accessibility practitioners and how they found their way into this particular area. And today I am pleased to be talking with Pat Kogos. Hello, Pat, how are you today?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. It's an incredibly rainy day in the Seattle area where I'm working from. Where are you talking to us from today?
I am coming to you from Chicago, where it is starting to be a little cool this time of year, but it's to be expected. Cool and clear.
Well, I always enjoy going there as I have my roots there, and yeah, maybe we'll get together in person at some point. But let's talk about what you're up to. What are you currently involved in?
So currently, I am the Director of Digital Accessibility at the University of Chicago, and I've been here since January of 2020. So it's been kind of a crazy ride because I was in the office for about 5 weeks before the pandemic hit. And then, of course, we all went home for a long period of time. So we were spinning up a new team at the time, the Center for Digital Accessibility. It was a brand new team. And so that's been kind of an interesting challenge to put all those things into place while we're all fully remote, but it worked really well. All the technologies, of course, are super helpful. And we took use of all those and lots of other tools too for our team to stay engaged. And so it's really been great, actually. A really nice time, a really important time to be in this field.
Well, what's the mission for the Center for Digital Accessibility?
So our mission is to create equal access to all of our digital assets for all people, all users. So we have, I think, a lot of work to do, as all large organizations do. So we're training people about the digital accessibility principles and the impact upon users. And we're helping everyone to understand how to create digital assets and how to maintain them. So there's, a lot to be done, of course.
And does this cover the full breadth of the university?
Yes, it does. Yep. So we are the main digital accessibility team for the entire university. But it's a distributed responsibility, though, because everyone who has a website is responsible for their own website, but helping people to understand how to make their own website more accessible is an important piece of the whole journey. So it's engaging users from across campus, and that part of it's been really great and interesting. There's a lot of very committed people. Everyone's very invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion here. So we're coming from a very strong point there.
Well, I want to talk more about in detail about the things that you're doing with the center, but maybe we can go back in time a little bit. First, I always like to learn how people found their way to where they are today in accessibility. So are there any certain milestones, things that happened in your career that started to point you toward specializing in this area?
Yeah, so if you don't mind if I go back really far, I can kind of give the whole path. So when I was in college, I was in a sorority called Delta Gamma. And our mission, our philanthropic mission, was sight conservation and aid to people who are blind. So service for sight primarily. So that was something that was just introduced to me at a young age. I had not done any work in that field prior to being in college, but learned a lot about it then. And then as an alumnus of the group, participated in a lot of activities around that. So vision screening children at a young age for, to see if they have any early signs of vision impairments. And then we would refer them, of course, to trained doctors who would follow up. But you can do some interesting screenings at a young age with people who are trained in just a very simple way to catch early signs. So I did that, and then continued to sort of go along that path. There is a center in St. Louis called the Delta Gamma Center for Children with Visual Impairments, and I became very involved with that organization as well. We were raising funds to create a new building and make it fully accessible for all the children and their families, and also create an accessible playground. There were lots of components to that. So it just continued to be part of my avocation in life, was this service for sight aspect of things. So
let me just dig into that a little bit more. Going back, you mentioned Delta Gamma was where things started out. I did some community service in college, but I also feel like I was half a knucklehead at the time. So it sounds like, enough things were done there that really, kind of got you motivated to continue there. So what was that experience like? And then how did you make the jump to doing it after college?
Yeah, so what we would do at the time, and I'm sure things have evolved over time, but we had fundraising events and whatnot to raise money for Service for Sight. We also had some of our students who were in our sorority who were, for instance, reading newspapers. At the time, you would read the newspapers on the radio. There's a blind radio station in New Orleans, which is where I went to college. I went to Loyola University in New Orleans. They, at the time, had a blind radio station, which I'm not sure if it's still in existence or not. So some of the members of our group would read for the blind radio station. We also could type in books, which would be converted into Braille. So there were a number of ways we could participate in that. But yeah, it's not as robust as your experience as an adult outside of college, because as you said, in college, we have lots of distractions. And so I did become more active after I graduated and became an alumnus.
And then as you started working with those organizations after college, then kind of what was the next step in the path after that?
So some of what I did at the Delta Gamma Center just helped inform me about the various barriers for people who have disabilities, including people who have visual impairments. So that was just really a learning time for me. I learned a lot. I think, I could be helpful in some ways, but they were also super helpful to me just to help understand. And the kids are fantastic. The center supports all kids. Their main mission is birth through age 3, but then they continue to support them in social groups after that, because that's one of the challenges for that group, is to have a social peer group that's a comfortable place for them to be. So anyway, I learned a lot about them, learned how wonderful and brilliant they all are, and how we could support them by just removing barriers physically, for instance, as I talked about with the playground. And then as I got older and realized that there were also digital barriers, it was a real life changer for me. I didn't know that, and I was in IT. So I felt like I couldn't believe I had spent the first, let's say, 15 years of my career in IT, and also running this parallel part of my life, which was service to people in the visually impaired community. And I never knew that there was an intersection. So when I, at one point in my IT career, I didn't know what I wanted to do next in IT. I was just looking for another path. So I went back to school and got a master's in writing. And then I went to, I was hired by Washington University in St. Louis to be a publications editor. So a completely different thing for me. Left IT per se to do some editing, but I ended up editing an online periodical that then I was introduced to this aspect of digital accessibility. And I was just blown away. Again, as I said, I had no idea. And I was, it was a light bulb. So I just dug into it and I just wanted to learn more. I became very energized by it. I wanted to be able to make make some difference in that field. So I just kept asking at WashU questions about digital accessibility to anybody who I thought could give me answers. And then eventually they said, hey, will you run our user group? Will you co-chair our user group for web accessibility? And I was thrilled to do so. So then I continued to dig in even more because, of course, when someone asks you to co-chair something like that, the first thing I say is, do I really have the skills for this?
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to give in a meaningful way to this, or am I just going to go show up? So I really continued to dig in and just learn as much as I could. I went to WebAIM to their training in Logan, Utah, which is, first of all, a beautiful setting. Second of all, they're a fantastic organization, and did my initial accessibility formalized training out there. So that was great for me to have that sort of formal approach to it, because again, I had just been digging into it myself for so long that it was
that's a common inflection point in experience for people as they get in accessibility. A lot of times it comes to a time when you're doing work and you're made aware of it, and then suddenly you're trying to identify resources and you're looking for people that can help you move forward. But accessibility is like, there's so many parts to it, and with digital accessibility, there are just so many things potentially that you can learn that I think it often overwhelms people at the start as well. How can I ever deal with this? And when we lock into just, all right, I'm going to work on this part and then that part, I think it's a lot easier. But it's great that you were able to get involved in some formal training early on. I think that's something that can benefit everyone that's just starting to get into it.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Joe. It's very intimidating for people when they first hear about it and first learn about it. There's an overwhelming amount of information out there. And I'm always learning. I feel like I'm always still learning something new. So just coming to terms with that there'll never be a point when I'll know everything, which is great for someone who loves to be a lifelong learner, as I do. And also, it's okay for everyone to come into this and just get started, because no one, I wouldn't say no one, but most people never know everything about it. It's really a vast field.
And so then continuing to move along, what was the next area you ended up getting involved with?
Yeah, so after I did my formal training at WebAIM and continued to do the user group at WashU, I started looking for an opportunity where it was a part of my job at WashU, but I really wanted it to be all of my job. So I just felt very driven to move into digital accessibility as a job position, as a role. So I just started looking. The University of Chicago is, of course, a fantastic university. They were at the time looking for someone to create this role at the university, Director of Digital Accessibility, and to help start up the new organization, the Center for Digital Accessibility. It was a great challenge, and I'm very pleased that they felt I was up to the challenge.
Well, I know I do teaching at the University of Washington, and so we do get information about accessibility, and with the Canvas learning system, it flags slides and documents and things that may not be accessible. But I think but I'm a person who's familiar with accessibility in a lot of detail. So sometimes I wonder, how well educational institutions are able to really get that information into the instructors and the curriculum, so that in fact it really ends up being part of the classroom materials.
Yeah, so that's actually something that University of Chicago thought of when they were creating this CDA. Our team is that they placed us within the academic technology solutions team in IT services and central IT, so that our academic technology solutions team has our instructional designers in it. We already spend a lot of time working with instructors, doing workshops on a variety of learning with technology subjects. So it was a perfect touch point. So we have someone on the academic technology team who's the lead to go between our team and the instructors so that we can have a good access point for that, because that is really important. And it's challenging. There's lots and lots of university content. There are lots of websites, lots of PDFs, lots of information. As you said, we use Canvas for our LMS. So there are various touch points where we have to make a difference in all of them. So just getting people educated across campus is a big thing, so that everyone can start to understand what accessibility means and what it looks like in a digital space. That's we spend a lot of time in that area.
And so, as you work through things at the center today, are there any particular projects that are taking up a lot of your time, or kind of what's, or on the other way of looking at it, kind of what's a day in the life and the types of things involved in building your program?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was just big for all of us is that the university created a digital accessibility policy and communicated it out early this year. It was January of 2021. They had intended on doing it last year, is my understanding, but the pandemic, of course, threw everyone's plans for a loop. So it was communicated out at the beginning of this year. And then we've really spent a lot of time, as I said, trying to help everyone understand what does it mean to be accessible. So there are guidelines to follow, of course, but really what you want to make sure you're understanding is the impact upon the user, because it's really all about embracing people with disabilities and not putting barriers in their way. So, just the educational piece of it, as I said, is really huge for us right now. We're also working on having some enterprise applications available to help people with these things, accessibility checkers and whatnot. So there's lots to be done, of course. And we're just attacking it, at all levels. Our procurement of accessible products, just making sure that what we're procuring is the most accessible product in the space. And that's also extremely challenging, hoping that vendors really will address that in their products, because sometimes it's extremely challenging to find something that's very accessible in the vended product world.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you about, just generally the process involved there. Certainly, if the products that the university is purchasing, aren't accessible, obviously that creates a huge problem. And there are, of course, requirements about that in terms of purchasing. But what's the actual process like when you're investigating things? I imagine it can be hard to vet certain products and get the right answers, and then really know whether that's going to work in a practical manner once things are instituted for the students.
Yeah, it is very challenging, and we have some processes in place at the university where we, hoping to get the most accessible thing. But as I've said, I'm really hoping that vendors will turn their attention to this, because everyone who's procuring the product shouldn't be all having to test this vended product. The vendors really can make the most impact here, because some vendors have a really large presence, not just in the higher ed world, but across other domains as well. And if the vendors make their product accessible, that would be a lot less work for us. But yeah, we have processes in place to hopefully choose the most accessible products we can.
And as we finish up here, are there any things, looking to the future? Are there any plans that you have for the center that the university has of, maybe where certain goals they want to achieve in like 5 years or 10 years? I know universities tend to have to have a lot of long-term plans for things.
Yeah, so we are looking at our capability maturity model of where we are as an organization right now with digital accessibility and planning. First of all, we're going to assess where we are in the model this year, and then hopefully from that have some strategic planning that comes out of that. But yeah, we definitely have 5-year goals out there. One of the things I'd really like to do is broaden the ability for my team, which is a small team, we have 4 people, is employ somehow people with disabilities to involve in our testing. Right now, we as a team are testing using screen readers, using keyboard only, using automated tools, but we would really like to find a good way to utilize these people who use screen readers in a native way. So that will be definitely one of the things we'll be addressing probably in the next year. And I would really welcome that. I think having some input from users with disabilities would be fantastic.
Well, that's great. And it was great to have this conversation with you, Pat. Thanks for taking the time to share your journey in accessibility, and hopefully things will ease up with the pandemic, and you're able to get back into that rather impressive urban campus that you have there.
Thank you. Yep. Looking forward to the return to campus. People are learning back there right now, and our team will be migrating back there soon. Yep.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Pat. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joe.